And welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. All throughout the month of November, I'm aiming to bring you a brand new review each and every day. Now, it might be a written review over at thegaminggang.com, or it could be a video review hosted by yours truly, which is obviously the case today. And today I am going to share my review of Outcast Silver Raiders from Esoteric, Ludology, and Exalted Funeral. This is written by Isaac Van Doyen with artwork provided by Kim Diaz-Holm and Lex Rocket. I apologize, I'm pretty sure I've mispronounced the author's name. This slipcase set contains 3 volumes, which total over 500 pages of content, and it carries an MSRP of $75, which includes the PDFs over at Exalted Funeral. Now, you can score the PDFs separately by way of DriveThruRPG, but to be very honest, you're looking at $60 for the PDFs. So the reality is the $75 for the physical books and PDFs is a pretty good deal. Speaking of deals, later this week is Black Friday, and Exalted Funeral is well known for some really sweet Black Friday deals. So you might want to swing on over there if you're interested in Outcast Silver Raiders to see if this happens to be a Black Friday offer, because you might be able to save a few bucks. All right, all that said, let's swing on over to the other camera, because here I've got the slipcase for Outcast Silver Raiders. A couple of things I want to mention before we jump on in. First of all, my friends over at Exalted Funeral were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. These days, it's very important you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the 3 books, but I do want to give you a really good feel for what you're going to find inside Outcast Silver Raiders. So first of all, this slipcase is really nice. This is going to hold up very, very nicely. It is nice and thick, very sturdy. I'm impressed because I have seen some slipcases in my day that were pretty skimpy. Not this one. This is really nice. All right, but we're here to talk about the game and these books, because that's the big selling point, not the slipcase. So we're going to take a look at the player's guide, then we're going to look at the referee's compendium, and then we're going to look at the Mythic North. So the player's guide clocks in at 64 pages. This is an old school influenced fantasy role-playing game. So I want to point out it's influenced because it's not a retro clone. It does use some different mechanics. There are a few tweaks to the old school sort of rule set that we're used to seeing. So it's important to keep that in mind. It is old school influenced. I would not say that this is specifically the old school revival. Now, the setting of this is inspired by 13th century Scotland. So we do have kind of a historical vibe to the proceedings. So this is not epic fantasy. This is not high fantasy. This is low fantasy. So there are monsters, but the monsters are hidden in the shadows. There is magic, but of course, magic is frowned upon. And essentially, the church will hunt you down if they find out that you are a magic user. This is also designed for a mature audience, because there are some aspects to this that are not for the kiddies. This is not 5e D&D. This is not 5.5e D&D. This is Outcast Silver Raiders. So the artwork throughout, kind of cool. It skews a bit more art punk than is my preference. But the thing I will point out that it does not interfere with the comprehension of the rules or the adventure and setting book. So that's super important, because that's one of my big critiques about a lot of art punk releases that are out there. I wouldn't call this art punk, but it does skew in that direction. Also, should say I am never a fan of white text on black backgrounds. We don't get a ton of it here, but we do get it. I wish, and yes, I understand it's because of the artwork and stuff, but still, it's just not easy on the eyes. I would prefer a layout like this. The red text, not necessarily a big fan either, but there is a red, white, and black motif to the artwork. So that is also the motif of the layout. So let's talk about mechanics because they are a little bit different. So if you are attempting a check, so essentially, if you are looking to achieve something, you're not looking to make a saving throw and you're not attacking, you're basically going to roll a six-sided die. You're going to add your attribute modifiers. And if you happen to have modifiers for anything else, and if you get six or higher, then you succeed. Now, as far as our attributes, we've got our classic strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, constitution, and charisma. Interestingly enough, they are presented in alphabetical order on the character sheet. So you start off with charisma. I thought that was kind of an odd look, but I was like, okay. I mean, most people are going to be looking up there. Well, what's my strength modifier? It's like, no, 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 that's your charisma modifier. Strength is quite a bit further down. So we are looking at the traditional 3 to 18 range, and we do have the modifiers. So we've got -3 to +3. That's what you would be adding to that six-sided die. Now, there are also saves. So if you're going to make a saving throw, we do not have saves versus wands or saves versus death or anything like that. We do have attribute saves. So you're rolling a 10-sided die, adding your modifier. You need 10 or higher in order to succeed. As far as combat goes, pretty standard as far as the old school using a D20. So you are going to be rolling a D20 looking to meet or exceed an armor class, and then you're able to roll for damage if you happen to beat the armor class. All of this is very rules light, and I think that is probably the best approach for Outcast Silver Raiders because this doesn't need additional crunch. This game just isn't styled for it. So all in all, I do like the game mechanics. I should point out that it does feel a little bit like it's different just for different sake, as far as like the six-sided die, the 10-sided die, and then using the 20-sided die. I tend to like to see just a uniformed mechanic throughout. It's not that big a deal as far as subsystems go, but like I said, it feels a little weird, almost like it's just different for the sake of being different. I have to laugh though, because right at the beginning of this book, there is advice for the players. And one of the items is don't be annoying. I love it. I think that's great. All right. So we move into the referee's compendium. And this is going to provide a lot of advice for the game master. In fact, about the first third of this book is devoted to how to play, how to get the most out of this game, how to get the most out of this setting without really getting into like major details about the setting, because that's contained in the Mythic North book, which we're going to look at in just a couple of moments. But I got to say, the advice that's in here for game masters, it doesn't matter if you're new to the hobby or if you've been playing for decades. It's really good. It's a lot of really useful thoughts and advice. We also have some optional rules too. So we will also have the introduction of some new classes because the core player's guide has three classes. We've got the rogue, we've got the wizard, and we've got the warrior. Pretty standard, old school kind of OD&D as far as those classes go. If you want to add more fantasy races, if you want to add more classes, they are included in this book. So we'll also get ritual magic. Now, magic itself is like blood magic. So this is another reason why this is aimed at a mature audience, because the reality is magic users have to inflict self-harm. They need to draw blood in order to cast spells. So you have players in your group who would have an issue with that, then reality is Outcast Silver Raiders probably is not going to be for them. But this does have kind of a sword and sorcery feel to it, even though it is taking place in an early medieval period. I should also mention this is more of a medieval period that's similar in tone to the Rutger Hauer movie Flesh and Blood, as opposed to Camelot. So if you think medieval and you start singing the songbook from Camelot, this probably isn't your game. But if you're a fan of Flesh and Blood, this is pretty much the tone of Outcast Silver Raiders. So as we're just flipping through here, we're going to get into some ritual magic. We're going to have magic items. We've got potions. Once again, this is a very low fantasy, low magic sort of setting. As far as NPC wizards and the sort, they tend to be just maniacal villains, lunatics, driven mad by not only the occult forces, but also their lust for power. We'll move into the optional classes. So we've got the barbarian, we've got the druid, we've got paladin. So we've got quite a few of the kind of advanced Dungeons and Dragons classes. They are unique to this system. And once again, this is a rules light role playing game. So you're not going to be saying, oh, well, at this level, you get this feat, and at this level, you get this feat. Now, there are various different things that will change about your character as you advance levels, but not to the extent you would see, say, in 5e or like Pathfinder second edition. Not even close. I will also say that there is a good variety in the classes, especially if you're going to utilize these optional classes outside of just the rogue, the warrior, and the wizard. Because we'll also have a cleric, we will now get into some divine magic, and that's how we're going to wrap up this book here. As far as the character advancement, it is experience points based, and you gain experience for each silver piece, that is the default currency, each silver piece of treasure. That's how you get experience points. That's the only way you get experience points. So it's all about the treasure. I like this referee's compendium. I have to say, my favorite part of the book is the advice. The first third of the book, I think that some of the tips and tricks and just overall discussion of how to approach Outcast Silver Raiders is really, really well done. So now we're going to look at what the big selling point is for Outcast Silver Raiders. And I will say the bulk of my review score is actually based on this volume. This is the Mythic North. This is epic. It is just packed with campaign content. So you are going to get 88 different encounters. We've got over, no, I don't think it's over. I think it's exactly 30, if I remember correctly. Keyed locations. We've got a mega dungeon. We've got a hex crawl. And I could see game masters and players spending years engaged with the Mythic North. Now, this is designed to be low prep, not no prep. As we've talked about, no prep adventures tend to be maybe not no fun, but they don't tend to be very memorable. This is just absolutely packed with cool encounters. interesting NPCs. And I would say, out of the various different fantasy role playing settings that I have encountered, the Mythic North is probably one of the best visualized, or maybe I should say implemented settings that I have ever encountered. Reading through this, you really get the feel for what this setting is supposed to be about. And we have all these various different factions who all have their own motivations. We've got some very interesting set pieces. There's monsters. We've got monsters here, but once again, this is not necessarily a game that's focused on constantly battling monsters. But we do have quite a few really cool monsters in here. But then, as an example, we start getting into the keyed locations. We get a map for each of them. Really well done. As I had also pointed out, we've got quite a bit of a hex crawl too. And I can also say that the hex crawl, the hexes do have some connection to each other. It's not as if it's like, well, this one hex has this, and this hex has this, and that hex has this, and none of it has anything to do with each other, so that it feels randomly generated. That is certainly not the case with the Mythic North. But as I flip through here, you can see this is jam packed. And then we also have the mega dungeon, which it's being called a mega dungeon, and it is a big dungeon. Don't get me wrong. It's not something that the player characters are going to rock on through in a couple of sessions. But I think the term mega dungeon turns some people off because they think of a place that's going to be actual real time years of playing in. That's not really the case here. But we have 4 mini dungeons also. Yes, yes. This section is all white text on black background. Not a fan, but still, it wasn't too bad. It wasn't as bad as some books that I've seen that have white text on black backgrounds. All right, so there is a peek inside the Mythic North. Really, really well done. Last thing that's in the Slipcase set is a small map. And we have a player's side here for the Mythic North. And then we've got the Game Master side with the various different locales marked. And that is how we wrap up what's inside the Outcast Silver Raiders Slipcase set that's available from Exalted Funeral. Swinging over to the other camera, I'm going to share some final thoughts and give this a review score. As far as the system itself, I like it. It's fine. Yeah, got some quibbles on it, but the reality is it's very rules light. It's relatively modular too, so you can kind of plug in things you like, take away things you don't like. Combat, quick, deadly. You're not going to see a bunch of hit point bloat where your combats are going to go on for an hour. I know there are some folks out there who enjoy that. I'm not one of them. And thankfully, I don't run role playing games for people who in my group happen to be into that really long, dragged out combats. So you're not going to find that. Everything's really well presented. Everything makes sense. It is in a logical progression as far as learning the rules. The player's guide is only 64 pages. I like the reference, the Game Master reference book. That's, I want to say, 144 pages. And I like the fact that we kind of open things up, where if you still want the kind of dark and grim 13th century fantasy, or I guess I'll say fantastical 13th century, but you want to add some elves into the mix, or maybe you want dwarves and you want more character classes. then that is an excellent addition as well. But in my opinion, the big selling point of Outcast Silver Raiders is the Mythic North. This has got to be one of the absolute best setting books and adventure campaigns that are available out there for old school role playing games. You could port this over relatively easily to just about any OSR game out there, any old school retro clones. This will fit in very nicely. Might take a little time to convert some of this stuff over, but it should be relatively easy. And you don't have to convert the whole thing over. You can just port over the sections that you think your players are going to encounter and take it from there. But this is really, really well done. And this is available separately as a PDF. I don't know if you can pick up just this hardcover, but all in all, I personally think that the Slipcase set for over 500 pages of content is a solid deal at $75 with the PDFs. I really do. So on a scale of 0 to 10, I give Outcast Silver Raiders a 9.5 out of 10. It is that good. If I could do a This Is Spinal Tap and give this an 11 out of 10, I certainly would. But we only go up to 10, so we will do 9.5 out of 10. All right, that is it for this time out. If you liked the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell, because it'll not only let you know when I share videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit the newly redesigned thegaminggang.com, where you're going to find news, reviews, and a whole lot more you will not see here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. And until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.